Sometimes the world is so small, you just crawl around in your own circle. Sometimes the world is so big, you can't find yourself anywhere in it. And joy is such a simple, simple word.
Hi, my name is Julia Buss and I'm author of Your Care Plan, A Nurse's Guide to Healthy Living, which is a book about how to look after your body and have a healthy lifestyle. I'm going to share with you a recipe for shepherd's pie, but this is a vegetarian version of shepherd's pie, which traditionally is a meat dish made in England with minced beef and mashed potatoes on top. But instead this time we're going to use lentils instead of meat. And the reason for this is that for your health, it's a really good idea to reduce the amount of meat that you eat. If you're not already a vegetarian, think about ways to cut out some of the meat meals you have. Here are the ingredients for shepherd's pie. Olive oil, a can of tomatoes, an onion, a couple of carrots, 4 cloves of garlic, some oregano and rosemary, sun-dried tomatoes, dried porcinis, the lentils, some turnips, sweet potato, butter, some cheese to go on top, salt and pepper, and a little balsamic vinegar. And that is all we need for today's recipe. One of the fantastic things about this meal is that it's going to be very high in fiber, and fiber is something that most of us need to increase in our diets. The Heart Association recommends that we have about 25 to 30 grams of fiber per day, and apparently the average person doesn't get anywhere near that. So it's really good to increase the number of fresh vegetables you eat so that you also increase the amount of fiber you get in your diet. Put the onions in with the garlic. There are actually 2 types of fiber. There's soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. And the soluble fiber works by kind of forming a gel with the liquid in your gut, so it helps absorb some of the sugars and fats. So it helps with keeping your cholesterol levels lower if you have a high fiber diet, and slows the absorption of sugars from the carbohydrates you eat, which is great to reduce those highs and low swings of blood sugar and keep your appetite normal. And the onions are making my eyes sting a little bit. All of the vegetables I'm using for this shepherd's pie are from our local farmers market, and that most of the vendors there sell organic vegetables, but you can ask the person selling where their farm is and if they use pesticides, and so you can really learn about where your food comes from. And the other reason farmers markets are really good is because the food is produced locally. It doesn't have to travel thousands of miles to get to your plate, so that helps reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So anyway, I'm going to chop up these carrots and put them in with the onion and garlic, and I'll add a splash of olive oil, and then we will soften these vegetables over a low heat for about 10 minutes. So while these carrots, onions and garlic and a bit of olive oil is just softening up on the stove, I'm going to chop up my fresh herbs. I'm just peeling the root vegetables for the topping of the shepherd's pie. Put the water on to boil for the root vegetables. It's starting to smell pretty good right about now. just breaking up these bits of dried porcini and dried tomato, because once they get water they expand quite a bit. I'm going to set the oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit for this, and when we put the shepherd's pie in, it will take about 30 minutes to cook. Shepherd's pie is a wonderful comfort food and reminds me of being a little girl in freezing cold wintry days in England and having this for my dinner. And it's a bit like that here today. It's very cold outside. Now I'm going to put these vegetables into the boiling water, and they'll probably take about 10 minutes until they're soft enough to take them off and drain them and mash them. So here goes, to be careful. One trying to escape. Now my vegetables here have got lovely and soft, so I'm going to add the rest of the ingredients to them and then put them back on the stovetop to help the lentils cook for a little bit. First of all, I'm going to add a can of tomatoes. These tomatoes were without any added salt and organic, which you can buy in cans, and it's always really good to look at the label and make sure there isn't some sugar added to the can of tomatoes that you didn't want to have. Next, I'm going to put in a splash, about a teaspoon of balsamic vinegar, because that really helps bring out the flavor in the tomatoes. Then I'm going to put in some dried porcini mushrooms and some sun-dried tomatoes, and both of these just add a wonderful rich flavor to the sauce, and you'll really realize how meat is really not that necessary when you have something as savory as this. I have my ready chopped rosemary and oregano, or oregano as we say in England, some freshly ground black pepper according to your taste if you like that, a little bit of salt, but be careful on how much you add, as salt is something that's good for us and our bodies need, but again we tend to have too much of it in our diet, and we really shouldn't have more than about just over half a teaspoon a day, and when you think about it, it's not very much. And then my final bit to add now are the red lentils. You don't have to use red lentils, you can use any lentils that you like. These ones are probably the quickest cooking lentils, and they kind of dissolve into a nice texture when they're cooked. So I'm going to put about a cup in to the mixture, stir it up, and then I'm going to put it back on the stove to cook the lentils. You may find that you have to add a little bit of water to the lentils as they cook, as they absorb some of the liquid, but you don't want this to be too runny, but a nice thick kind of stew. I'm just chopping some bits of cheddar to sprinkle on the top. It's just a nice little kind of extra tasty cheddary thing on the top of the pie, makes it very good. Now I'm going to mash my root vegetables with a couple of tablespoons of butter and some freshly ground black pepper, a bit of salt, until they're fairly smooth. It's just a rough mash, so you don't have to worry about being too perfect. This meal has a bit of cheese in it, and cheese is one of the sources of saturated fats in our diet, and saturated fats are the things that have a lot of calories and can contribute to high cholesterol. But in this dish we're really using a very small amount. Most of the saturated fats we eat comes when we eat things like steaks and animal products like that. So we're just going to have a little bit of cheese on the top of this for flavour. After about 20 minutes your lentils will be nicely cooked, especially if you used red lentils. If you used green lentils or another kind, they may take a little bit longer. But as any good cook, you always should remember to taste, and you'll be able to see that the lentils are nice and soft when you taste your delicious shepherd's pie. So now I'm just going to assemble the final product. As you can see here, my lentils have become a nice kind of thick sauce, and I did end up having to add about half a cup of water as they were cooking. They absorbed some of the water from the tomatoes, so I added a little more. So now I'm just going to pour these lentils into the bottom of my oven-proof dish. Put them all in there. And then we will cover it with the potato topping. And this is the sweet potato and turnip mash that we made. I just want to cover over the lentils. And this will probably be enough for about 4 people, and I like to serve it with something like Brussels sprouts or green beans or perhaps some cabbage to keep it in the traditional British style dinner, although this is probably not that recognizable as a shepherd's pie for most of my fellow countrymen. I just put that all on top. Delicious. Don't want to waste any of this delicious sweet potato. So easy. It's all done. And then for the grand finale, I'm going to sprinkle some of my little bits of cheese on top. And you don't, if you're vegan, you don't have to include either the butter in the mashed root vegetables or the cheese on top. It's entirely optional. And this, I promise you, will be a great alternative to having a meat dinner for one of your suppers this week or at any time. So that's that. There's my cheese on top, and I'm going to take this shepherd's pie and put it in the oven, 350 degrees Fahrenheit, for about 30 minutes until the cheese is all melted and bubbling on top. So here we go. Put it in the oven. And I'm going to set my timer for 30 minutes. Et voila. I'm now going to take out the shepherd's pie as it's ready, and you'll be able to see how it looks so good. There we go, lovely hot bubbling shepherd's pie. You can find the recipe for this shepherd's pie at www.yourcareplan.org, and it's also going to come at the end of this video. We'll have the recipe for you. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoy making your vegetarian shepherd's pie, and there are other recipes like this in your care plan, a nurse's guide to healthy living.